Hello, welcome to Gardener's World and welcome to a rather wet, soggy but very lush long meadow. Everything is so rich and full at the moment, not just of growth but colour too. This swell of blue that we've got from the Camasias, and also these peonies are just beginning to open out here in the orchard beds. And because it's been raining all day and all last night, this is getting a little bit heavy and will flop. And the important thing is to support these plants before they need it. Tree peony has a woody frame, so needs it a bit less, but herbaceous peony like this, that new growth has all happened in the last month or so. So therefore it's going to be a lot floppier. So just gently put supports around it. The key thing when you're supporting plants is, one, do it before they need it, and two, make it as unobtrusive as possible. You're not trying to constrain them, you're just trying to gently bolster them. On tonight's programme, Rachel is forging ahead with her new kitchen garden, but things aren't all going to plan.
I'll come clean about my tomatoes. Disaster.
There's a chance to watch again the day that Joe spent with the singer-songwriter Will Young, who revealed how his passion for gardening has been crucial in helping him with his mental health.
It's definitely become a very beneficial thing for my well-being, and something that I actually deliberately put into my daily, weekly, monthly routine.
And I shall be sowing runner beans, squashes, and also planting a dwarf plum tree in the cottage garden. If you can plant, particularly young plants, small plants now, when the soil is moist and there's rain and it's warm and there's lots of light, they're going to grow really fast. And I'm putting into the mound a couple of annuals that I've grown from seed. Now, this was old seed, actually, that I had left over from last year. I sowed it at the beginning of March, and now we've got small plants ready to plant out. And although at this stage of May, the garden is lovely, actually, you do need to plan ahead. Now is the time to be thinking what it's going to be looking like at the end of June and into July. Not too late to sow seeds to do this, by the way. If you sow tender annuals now, you'll have them in the garden ready for a really good July display. My first plant is Nicotiana. Now, this is Nicotiana lime green. It's a tobacco plant. It has the traditional tobacco plant fragrance, that slight musky smell. And these yellowy green flowers are perfect for this part of the garden. If I take one out, like that, there you can see. Nice root system. You want to be able to see the roots on the outside of the plug, but also see some soil. And if all you can see is root winding round and round, it's a bit too late. So it's worth just checking every now and then to see if they're ready. And of course, planting from plugs couldn't be easier. You just make a little bit of a hole, stick it in, and firm around it. And because there's rain, they don't even need watering in. Now, the other one that I'm planting is this. These are marigolds, and you can see they're just starting to come into flower. And this is a variety called Vanilla Cream. And it's got a lovely pale yellow on the outside of the petal, and then at the heart of the flower, a rather deeper, more egg yolk colour. Now, I want you to see my wisteria. It isn't much, but it's something. And you can see up there we're getting the beginnings of a few little white flowers, which is really exciting. So if I can get this to flower and train over this structure, that will be absolutely fabulous. But I have to admit, in all modesty, that however well it grows, I don't think it'll be a patch on Chris Lane's wisteria. Now, Chris grows his wisteria down in Sittingbourne in Kent. And last year, at the peak of the wisteria season, we paid him a visit.
I love wisterias because of the fact that they produce an abundance of long raceme flowers, and particularly the Chinese wisteria and the Yamafuji wisteria from Japan have got such wonderful scent. So a combination of scent and flower, they are terrific plants for planting in the garden. Wisterias belong to the legume family. Now, legume family includes things like sweet peas, various other things like that. And they have a typical pea flower. Wisteria flowers are produced on a raceme. The individual flowers open from the base of the raceme down to the apex. So you can see they're well in flower at the top and there's buds at the bottom. The flower buds at the bottom are facing in a different direction, so they rotate over 180 degrees so that the back of the individual flower, which is called the flag, is facing outwards, with a small yellow nectar guide there for the bees. And when a bee alights on the flower, it pushes apart the two side petals, which are called wings, and down on the basal petal, which is called the keel, to reveal the stigma and the stamens. So it will deposit pollen on the stigma, it will collect pollen and then take to another flower. There are 4 species of wisteria in the world, and the most commonly seen one is Wisteria sinensis. This was introduced from China. Wisteria sinensis flowers early in the season. It's about the first of the wisterias that we grow that comes into flower, especially when grown on a south-facing wall. It can also be grown as a standard and to a degree on a pergola. The home of wisteria is really in Japan, and there are 2 species there, Wisteria brachybotrytis, which is called Yamafuji, and Wisteria floribunda, which is called Nodafuji. This is an extraordinary cultivar that they've called Kiyoshaku. It differs from the other wisterias we've talked about so far in the fact that it twines clockwise. The others are anti-clockwise. And this particular cultivar has the longest known racemes in any Wisteria floribunda and can be up to 1 metre in length. The reason these racemes lengthen is that from the tip, you can see that the distance between the pedicels, the part that holds each flower, is quite short. Whereas on the flowers that are starting to open, the distance is greater. So it just elongates as it goes down with the flowers opening. This is my favourite Wisteria floribunda. It's a cultivar called kimono. And the reason I love this plant is the whitish flower, which is suffused nicely with a pinkish mauve colour, and the reverse, the calyx at the back, is really quite a deep mauve colour, and that's visible when you look at the plant as a whole. It's not too vigorous, it's fairly compact, it's easy to train, and if only you could smell through the lens, that is gorgeous. Quite important when choosing a cultivar wisteria for your garden is to know your planting position. This particular form is really good for growing on south-facing walls and grown as a standard, as you can see here. The other aspect you need to think about is the colour of the wisteria. This particular one has this lovely violet purple colour, very attractive young emerging foliage, which makes a great combination. It's a form of Wisteria brachybotrytis called Okayama. There are other cultivars of Wisteria brachybotrytis in colours of white, pink and blue. Wisterias can be grown in many ways. I suppose the ultimate and easiest way, you can plant one into a tree. Best planted on the north side, as it will grow into that tree and go towards the sun. They're sun worshippers, and for a while you won't see anything, and then a few years later on the whole tree will be festooned with flowers. You can also grow them as standards or even as shrubs. Standards, you need a good strong stake, and you train it up that stake and form a branch framework at the top, cutting all the low shoots off. Grown as a shrub, it's just like a standard but low down. One of the most iconic ways of growing wisteria is on a pergola or an archway. And this was first seen when Westerners got out to Japan and the way they were cultivating there. It's very important, particularly with the long raceme sorts, that the pergola is sufficiently high, at least 10 feet to 12 feet. Another reason for my love of wisterias is a love of nature as well. And when these are in flower, the perfume that's given off by them attracts bees, not just honeybees, but bumblebees. This is something that gardeners can do to help the bee population. I just love them. Wisteria, the king of climbers.
Those wisteria just looked amazing. But there's one aspect of wisteria that I slightly miss out on because my sense of smell is very limited, and I've never really enjoyed their fragrance as much as clearly some people do. But boy, do I love the way they look. And I'm very happy with the way that these two little beds look on the next level of the mound. This used to be hard paving, and this time last year, took up the hard paving and made 2 new beds. And in the autumn, they were planted with 2 tulips, Honky Tonk and Bud Light, which keep on this theme of the pale yellows. And then they have grown up through the forget-me-nots, and for the last few weeks, they've been fabulous. Now, it's time to see another of your gardens. And I'm glad to say, not just here in the UK, because we've been sent a film from North Carolina in America, from a gardener who watches the program avidly.
Hey, I'm Aaron Camp. I am a university lecturer at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Hi! I'm gonna let my obligatory garden cat interrupt for a moment. And I teach in the biology department. I'm actually gearing up to teach field botany somehow online at the moment. So I've watched enough Gardener's World. I would argue that in the States, I'm probably Monty's biggest fan. Ground orchid, the best kind of orchid, as Carol would say, just lovely. Something I don't believe I've seen on Gardener's World before. This is a little baby big leaf magnolia, the largest single leaf tree in temperate regions. So this is the tropical area here, just starting to wake up. This is a catalpa tree that I planted from seed. If you've never grown a tree from seed, you've got to try it. It's probably a few things in the garden more satisfying. Here's a project I'm pretty proud of. Took some terracotta pots, some clothesline, bought some cheap agave pups, and made about 7 different hanging baskets. Thanks for a quick tour around the garden. If you ever need an American correspondent, you can always hit me up. You know, maybe we could do around the yard and 80 weeds. Something like that.
Thank you, Aaron, for sending in pictures of your garden and how you are using it. And I love the thought of people watching us all over the world. So if you are watching this in any corner of the globe, please send us a short film of your garden and we'd love to see it. Now, I'm digging up carrots, which normally by now I would have cleared out the ground because these were sown last spring. But they've remained good all winter, probably because it's been so very wet. And they haven't yet set seed, and that would make them very woody. And I was clearing some the other day, and I just thought we'd try them, because normally they're too old, and they were delicious. They were beautifully sweet and succulent and really tasty carrots. So I'm keeping these, but anything you can grow and produce from your own garden is good. And Rachel has been setting up and establishing her own vegetable garden at home. And we went along and joined her just as she was beginning to plant.
It's been 4 weeks since I planted my apple cordons. They were the very first thing to go into my new kitchen garden. I'm so excited that these apple cordons are in flower. It means they're really settling in nicely. And I'm going to leave the blossom for now. But once the tiny apples start to develop behind the flowers, I'm going to take those off so that all the energy can really go into making strong roots and strong baby trees. And next year, there will be apples. Today's the day that planting really begins. I've started some plants off in a cold frame, and lots of them are ready to go out into the veg garden. I have to say, though, not everything's been quite so successful, and I'll come clean about my tomatoes. Disaster. One reasonable seedling, one sort of weak, feeble little thing here, otherwise nothing. Normally, I'd expect all of those to have germinated, but I've been using old seed, you know, packets just ripped off the front of gardening magazines years ago. Same is true here of the sweet peas. I've got 3 have come out. So we'll see, maybe it's early days, I'll give them a bit longer. But also ready to go in my shallots. Started off in pots, and now they can go out. Can you hear the mason bees? They're going in and out of the holes in this old wall. Watch them all day. Right, off we go. As you will see, this area has been completely transformed. I have now got the vegetable garden, I think, of my dreams. It's looking fantastic. It's been a lot of hard work, a lot of elbow grease. My husband has made me all of these raised beds, which is fantastic. Last month, I sowed sugar snap peas into some old guttering. And the idea is that the seedlings will just slide out into my new beds in one go. What could possibly go wrong? Well, they may have to come out in bits, in which case, so be it. There's that bit going there. I'm just going to try with a bit of persuasion. There we go. That's the rest of it just sliding in nicely. 2 rows should be plenty. All they need now is some twigs cut from the garden for a bit of support. Doesn't have to be too pretty. And then if I do find that I've got pigeons coming in, disrupting everything, then I will probably just drape a bit of netting over this. Finally, a good watering in and the peas are done. Next up, the shallots. A simple string line as a guide, and it's straight from the pots into the ground. There's plenty of veg that can be sown straight into the ground from seed. Right, now I've got a rather ramshackle collection of seeds. Some of it's been sent to me actually by a friend who's used it and sent me the rest of the packet. I'm starting off with an old favourite, little gem lettuce. I'll sow a couple of rows now and stagger the sowing over the coming weeks to give me a regular supply of fresh leaves. Just dotting those as thinly as I can. You can probably barely see those dropping in along that drill. I love doing this. I could do this all day and all night if I could see. And I just flick the soil like that. Sort of pat it down and then they'll get watered in. I want this to be as close to a traditional working garden as possible, so at least 2 of the beds are going to be for cut flowers. Right, I have decided that I'm going to devote this whole bed to, I think, the best value summer flower for cutting, which is dahlias. And I sort of came rather late to them. I didn't used to like them very much. And then I had a sort of epiphany, and now I can't get enough of them. Hence, a whole bed, and I know that's a lot of dahlias, but in my opinion, you can never have too many. They are tender. But in this garden, particularly, because we've got the walls, and they act like sort of heat storage units, these walls, and they release that heat actually during the night, and it's very sheltered. I think I can get away without putting these into pots first. So I've chosen this one to go at the front, which is called Bishop of Oxford. And it's a little bit shorter. It's got single flowers in a sort of really bright orangey red. They've got these tubers, which are these sort of rather bulbous, dangly, sort of dried out looking things. Doesn't look promising at all, but actually if you look close, there are little tiny shoots there already. So I'm going to put them actually in pretty much straight rows because this is a working area. It's not just supposed to be pretty. And they like a nice rich soil. And also you need to make sure when you're planting them, whether it's in the ground or in a pot, that you get all the soil or the compost really in good contact around those tubers so there aren't any air pockets. So exciting. I love dahlias. We'll probably have flowers fairly soon in the summer. They really are, if you keep picking them, which I will be, they're the best value flowers ever. And I can just see it now. I can see it, all this colour here, and I can't wait.
I shall be putting my dahlias out in a week or so, and they are wonderful plants. But I'm not actually planting a dahlia now. I'm digging a hole to add a plum to the cottage garden. But this plum is a bit special because it's called gold dust, got a lovely yellow fruit, and it's designed to be grown in a container. And if you've got a very small garden, it means you can grow fruit. But I'm going to give this chap a chance in the soil. We've got lots of crab apples and gooseberries and rhubarb growing here in the cottage garden, so a plum would be a good addition. Now, I've dug a generous hole and broken up the subsoil so the drainage is good. If you are planting fruit trees, particularly dwarfing fruit trees, which are on a limited rootstock, so the roots don't spread far and wide, they need good drainage. If you're growing them in a pot, add some grit and a little bit of compost if you've got it. And you can see that the graft is right up here. So that's the stem of the rootstock, and then the variety, gold dust, is grafted on it like that. So it means that it's a little miniature standard. And this won't get hugely bigger. Its maximum height will be about 5 foot with the same spread. So I will pop that in the ground like that, making sure it's the same level. It can grow in a little bit of shade, but sun is always good, and then I just backfill around it. Now, this I will firm in with my heel like that, just round the edge, because we don't want that to rock. one of these in a pot in your back garden, it won't give you a vast harvest, but it will give you a few delicious yellow fruits. Now, we're going to visit another of your gardens. And all of us at these times are trying to grow whatever we can get hold of, quite frankly. But I bet not many of us are growing what this viewer has in her garden.
Welcome to my garden. My name's Robin. I'm a teacher from Pembrokeshire, West Wales. I've been living in this house for about 6 years. It had been my grandma's house and she loved her garden. So today I'm going to be planting quinoa, otherwise known as quinoa. It's really high yielding as well, so for small gardens it's a real winner all round. So I'm just going to sow direct into the soil, 30 centimetres apart and 1 centimetre deep, and then just cover them over and let them do their thing. So before I go, I want to show you my novelty plant for this year. It's a loofah. Those back scrubbers, they're a plant. Who knew? I tried it last year and it was a disaster, and I promised all my friends loofah sponges for Christmas, and no one got any because I planted them too late, and they're a tropical plant and I put them in a greenhouse that had holes in, so they didn't work. But this year I thought it's a prime opportunity to bestow all my attention and affection on these little plants. You can also see that I've named them. So from me and my garden, bye bye.
Nelly, this way. Good girl. Come on. Good girl. Good girl. Come on. I have to say that I've never tried to grow either loofahs or quinoa myself, but the important thing is, if you grow what interests you and what you think of as fun, then you're going to do it, and you're going to try and do it well. And that is the route to gardening. There's no right way to do anything, there's no right thing to grow. It's whatever turns you on. Now, I know an awful lot of people like acers, and I planted this acer last year. It's come through winter absolutely fine. What they hate more than anything else is drought and being exposed to wind. And I'm mulching it with composted bracken. The beauty of composted bracken is that it's ericaceous. It's acidic, and by and large all maples prefer acidic soil, and as well as acting as an efficient mulch, keeping down weeds and keeping in moisture, it will also slightly make the soil more ericaceous. It won't change its nature, but it will just help. And pine bark will do the job really well. So buy a bag of composted bark and then spread it round your acers, and they will thank you for it. Now, still to come. We revisit the day that Joe spent with Will Young in his garden in Cornwall.
Without gardening, you wouldn't be where you are today.
Essentially, what I'm saying is, without gardening, where would I be? And I just love it. It's so good for the soul, and it's just a pleasure to be in this space.
Three weeks ago, I sowed these zinnias. This is Zinnia Orange King. Now, I love zinnias because they're this little explosion of petals. And orange is a colour that works really well for us in the dual garden. But zinnias come in lots of different colours, so you'll find one that will work for you. Brilliant as a cut flower, brilliant in the border. But they are tender, so they need to be sown under cover, grown on, which then means that they need to be pricked out so that when the nights get warmer and you can plant them out, they're growing nice and strongly. So I've got some compost with fairly good drainage. I'll half fill the pot like that. And then the first thing you do when you're pricking out any plant is to look to see if it has true leaves. Down the bottom, you've got the seed leaves, and then above it, the true leaves. So the first pair of leaves are simply there to get the seedling going, and that's when it's okay to handle it. Now, the second thing, when you're pricking out, do not hold the plant by the stem. Hold it by the leaf, and the reason is really simple, because the stem is very fragile, it's easily broken, and can't be repaired. then I like to use an old knife, but anything that you can work around the roots and just gently lift it up, taking as much root as you can, and there you are. A mass of roots attached to really what is quite a small plant. And just pop that in there like that, and top it up. Now, when you're pricking out, don't firm down with your fingers, because there's a real chance that you will damage the fragile roots. Just let them settle naturally, and then when you water it, that will push the soil around all those roots, and that's all it needs. And the idea is to grow these on, so they're nice strong plants, and I can put them out into the border when they're almost ready to flower, which in this case will be in about 3 to 4 weeks' time. Right, I will work through this tray, and then I will put them, when they're all potted up, into a cold frame, which is the ideal halfway house between a heated greenhouse and full exposure out in the garden. And I find at this time of year, cold frames are invaluable. And a few years ago, Nick gave a masterclass in how to build a cold frame using recycled materials.
Cold frames are effectively a miniature glass house. They do everything that a glass house does, and the best thing about them is you can make them yourself and they cost virtually no money. You know, putting a cold frame together is really quite straightforward. All you need is some old pallets, some polycarbonate, a few basic hand tools, and that's about it. First thing I'm going to do is break this one up with a hammer. Now, having broken up the pallets, I'm left with all these timbers, which I'm correlating together to make the front sides and back of the cold frame. So these will all join together and form the front. 2 panels either side, and they will have a slight angle on them, so when the roof goes on, the water can run off. And then tallest section at the back. So I'll be battening these together, joining them all together at the sides, and we have a very simple, straightforward cold frame. Now I've cut all the batons to size out of the scrap pallet wood, and they're going to be the pieces that hold these outside frames together. So this is the front of the cold frame, just using basic wood screws to hold it together. And all I need to do is screw these together, and it'll hold the whole frame as one. The next thing I need to do is to cut the top of these 2 side panels. To secure the whole thing together, I've used hinges. Equally, you could use L-shaped steel plates to hold it together, or even blocks of wood. Well, that's the basic bits of the cold frame put together. And I'm going to use polycarbonate for the lid. And it's about £10 worth. I've used cable ties at the back here. They're heavy duty and they'll work as a brilliant hinge for the lid. They're also cheap as well. And I've used small cable ties on the front here, and they just hook onto these screws to stop it blowing around in the wind. Now, the way a cold frame works is very much like a glass house. So as the heat goes in through the polycarb, it's trapped and creates a warmer microclimate for the plants that are in there. But it also has the added bonus that it protects the plants from heavy rain and from wind. Now, when it comes to siting the cold frame, if you can get it close to the house, that's a real bonus, or in a sheltered area, ideally against a south-facing wall. You don't necessarily have to put it onto soil or onto hard paving. It can go either way. On hard paving, you can stand out pots in it. On soil, you can directly sow into the ground. So all round, it creates a really useful growing microclimate. Because cold frames are effectively a mini glasshouse, they can get really hot. So ventilation is important to keep your plants healthy. It can be as simple as a block of wood to hold it open, or if you need a little less ventilation, that will do the job. So I think if you choose to install one of these at home, you're going to wonder how you've ever lived without it.
Nick makes that look very easy, but even if you don't have his carpentry skills, any kind of cold frame that you make will serve you well. I cannot recommend them too highly. We use every square inch of ours every single day of the year. Now I'm mixing up some compost here. It's a mixture of bought-in peat-free compost, some garden compost, which I finished and I put it into the barrow, that's sieved, and a bit of grit. I'm going to add a little bit more grit, actually, to get good drainage, because I want to plant out some tomatoes that I sowed in January. So I'll mix that up a little bit. Now, I just want to stress that these are not the tomatoes that I sowed last week. Those have only just germinated and they won't be ready to prick out, let alone plant out, I would say for another 6 to 8 weeks. These are the ones that I sowed in January. And you can see they're a good size, and actually they're beginning to suffer a little bit. And I can tell that because they're turning a little bit yellow, even a little bit blue, and that's a sign that they've run out of nutrients in these small pots. They need to be moved on. This is a variety called Mauvais de Marche. I've grown it for a few years. It's a French beefsteak tomato. And it's got a lovely taste. It's meaty, it's big, but does need to be grown in a greenhouse. And either in a border in a greenhouse or, as I'm going to do, in recycled pots. And I wouldn't plant outdoor tomatoes until well into June, when the nights have warmed up. The pots I'm using are a fairly good size. You can see I've got a pile of them here in the corner. Some of these I've used year after year, nearly 2 decades. So if you look after plastic pots, they can serve you very well. And this makes an ideal size. It's about bucket size for growing a nice, strong tomato plant. We'll put some compost in the bottom like that. Take this out. Now, the key thing when you're planting tomatoes either in soil or in a pot is to plant them good and deep. And that means right up to that bottom leaf, that deep. And what will happen is that the roots will form from the stem. That will help anchor it and also means that it has more access to nutrients. So we'll put that in there like that and then fill the soil around it. Right, even a bit more. And then firm down. We'll put the label back in there. That's the first one. And these will line up along here. And in time, I will stake them all like that, tie them in, and start harvesting this lot round about the middle to the end of July, depends on the weather. Now, I just want to thank you all for sending in your fabulous films. They've given us all a huge amount of pleasure and inspiration. One word I would say is we're still getting a lot that are filmed in portrait. That's upright. Just remember, a TV is long ways like that, so you need to film it that way. So if you want it to be shown, film it holding your phone across in landscape format. But we've got one last one today, which comes from Leicestershire, and the Reynolds family, whose 3 children have been doing homeschooling, home playing, and quite a lot of home gardening too.
Hi, I'm Vicky from Lutterworth and welcome to our garden. It's our little safe space in this world of badness. This is my favourite part of our garden, my greenhouse. Here we've got a nice selection of veg that we've already started. But what I want to share today is a bean experiment which we've done with our kids this year, which they've thoroughly enjoyed. For this, you need a glass jar, some kitchen roll, water and some beans. To start, if you get your glass jar and a piece of kitchen roll, which you put into your jar, this will hold the beans in place around the edge of the jar. In the middle, you want to get some more kitchen roll and you want to pad that out to make sure that that holds the beans in place against the edge of the glass. Once it's padded out, you can place the beans on the outside of the glass and make sure it's in the middle. Once they're in and secure, we'll add the water. Now it's ready to put on a sunny windowsill and watch every day. Here's a few that our kids have done, which they've thoroughly enjoyed, and we're really looking forward to planting these out now and eating the beans when they're ready.
I think that idea of sowing the beans on the outside so you can see them growing through the glass is brilliant. Well, I'm going to sow some runner beans now. Now, I've got a variety here called Scarlet Emperor, beautiful, as well as producing really lovely beans. And runner beans like our climate, because until the frosts come, they don't mind if it's a bit cloudy, if it's a bit rainy, if we have a cool summer or a hot summer. As long as they don't get too dry, they will be happy. I'm putting them in on the edge, just one per plug. Now, they have a long taproot, so you can grow them in pots or in plugs, as I am, but not in a seed tray. Of course, you can sow them direct, but it's a little early. What you need to worry about is not so much the temperature during the day, but at night. So what I like to do is sow some now in plugs, and then plant them out as young plants. And at the same time I plant them out, I then sow more directly into the ground. So we get a slightly staggered harvest. I will put these somewhere warm. Windowsill is ideal, greenhouse obviously if you've got it, a cold frame, and these will start to germinate quite quickly. Push that down a little, cover it up lightly, and they should be ready to plant out in about a month. Right, that's them. Now I'm going to move on. While I'm here in the potting shed and while the rain is still falling outside, I'm going to do a bit more sowing. And it's time to sow squashes and pumpkins. And there are a huge amount to choose from. If you go online, you'll see there are really dozens of different squashes and pumpkins of all kinds of shapes and colours. But if you want a Halloween one, you want the biggest one you can possibly get. I've got Blue Hubbard here, which not only looks fantastic with a sort of blue skin and deep yellow ochre flesh, but can grow up to about 20 pounds in size. Now, it doesn't matter what variety you grow, the technique is exactly the same. Don't use a seed tray, don't use plugs, you need pots. And I will sow 2 seeds per pot. It means that I'm pretty guaranteed that one of them at least will germinate. So just push them in on their edge. Once these have germinated, you take out the smaller of the 2, and it means the one that's left behind will have all the compost, all the nutrition, all the moisture to itself. So we'll just cover those over a little bit and put them somewhere nice and warm. And you'll start to see them appear in about 10 days, 2 weeks' time. And then when the weather gets warmer, you can put them outside and let them grow on outside for at least 2 weeks. Don't worry if you're not planting these out until well into June. Now, last year, Joe went down to Cornwall to visit the singer-songwriter Will Young at his parents' garden. Now, Will is a keen gardener, but more than that, this garden in particular has huge meaning to him.
I've come to visit a musician and actor who I've heard is a pretty keen gardener himself.
Hello.
Hi, Will.
Welcome.
How you doing?
They're dogs.
There are dogs. There are dogs.
There are dogs everywhere.
What a stunning part of the world. It's absolutely beautiful here, isn't it?
Great, isn't it?
So what's your connection to Cornwall?
Well, I've been living in Cornwall, actually, from about 14 years ago. So I started coming down this way because I was doing politics at Exeter. And then when I went into pop, I wanted to find a place, you know, just for some seclusion, and found this wonderful house. And then my parents came down 6 years ago and created this amazing garden.
And they're keen gardeners?
Yeah, my mum's garden designer, and she's a very keen gardener, as is my dad. My sister's a gardener, and I was a gardener throughout A-levels and university. I used to listen to music while I mowed, and before I entered Pop Idol, and I listened to my audition songs that I had to do, and earned the money to get up to London to do the audition.
Fantastic.
Through gardening.
Wow, so gardening. Without gardening, you wouldn't be where you are today.
Essentially what I'm saying is, without gardening, where would I be? And I just love it. It's so good for the soul, and it's just a pleasure to be in this space, you know. Yeah. Would you like to see more of the garden?
Love to.
Come with me.
Yeah, love to. This is a lovely little... This is a garden within a garden, this area.
It is actually,
isn't it?
Yeah. My mum wanted to create a gravel garden. All this bed here, apart from the olive tree and maybe a couple other plants, is all from cuttings that my parents have made. Okay. Cuttings or split plants.
Yeah, okay, so some proper serious gardening going on here,
Yeah, proper
then.
serious gardening.
And this is gorgeous, isn't it? I mean, at the level of it, there's space between them as well.
And I know some of them. So this is a clematis. The trellis was my mum's cot when she was a baby.
Really?
Yeah. That's a cutting, but we got that from Hampton Court.
Yeah, it's a beautiful clematis, isn't it?
Got the what are they called?
Aquilegias.
Aquilegias,
Yeah.
so the yellows.
Granny's bonnet is the common name. Aquilegias, there's yellow ones.
Granny's
and
bonnet.
Granny's
I like that.
bonnet.
I can see that, actually.
Yeah.
But I know this one is a dachshund. Likes the heat, likes full sun.
Herbaceous perennial, I believe.
That's the one. What I love about being in gardens is not just like the plants and everything you get from that and the colours, but also all the nature that comes with it. So my dad makes a lot of bird boxes. That was meant to be for a wagtail, but it's become a bumblebee's nest, which I love, you know. And
Yeah,
so
there's bees going in and out,
yeah, you can
isn't
see
there?
them go in and out, and then there's a wagtail that comes. And the cardoons, I learned a trick on Gardener's World, which is to prop them up, and then the plant grows through the
So
sort of little
stake
twigs.
them?
Stake them, but with sort of these delicate twigs to prop up the leaves.
You've been watching Monty?
Yes, I have. But I'm one of those sort of like slightly cavalier gardeners. Is I just like throw them in, see how it looks, learn the name afterwards. A bit like my songs, really.
Beautiful steps, Will. They're gorgeous.
Thank you
steps.
so much. They are actually gorgeous, aren't they?
They're very inviting.
They are inviting, and I think what I love about this garden is you can see the different levels of the rock there.
Yeah.
You know it's been there for ages.
It adds a real solidity, this local stone.
Yeah, yeah. And it's
Gorgeous.
very Cornish, and you see it everywhere.
But also the way, I mean, things are just self-seeded in here, aren't they? Like the little ferns and this little Welsh poppy.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? I really like these ornamental grasses as well.
I love grasses.
Yeah.
And, you know, I chop them down maybe October time, clear them out occasionally.
Leave them for the winter because they actually, a lot of them can hold their form and then cut them down in
Yes,
spring.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they look great through the winter. Deeper Gigantea at the back, it's just come out, it gets nice and tall. This one has changed its name recently. That's another thing about plants, they change their name.
Well, that's unfair.
That is unfair.
It's like Prince. The grass formerly known as...
Exactly.
So what is it now?
This is formerly known as Stipa arundinacea, and now it's called Anamanthale lawsoniana.
But you'd win a game at Scrabble, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure you get that past Scrabble. You need, no, I haven't got that many letters.
But we should go through, and I'll show you
these steps,
I love these steps.
They're great. Got the whole entourage with us still.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, we're a bit of a gang now.
Come on, you can
It's
do
only
it.
with skinny people, isn't it? Come on, you coming through? Oh,
Well done.
well, a good little hop. So is this one of your favourite areas here?
Yes, this is. I love structural gardening. You know, I love literally that little kind of landscaping of garden.
The process of gardening as well, isn't it, is very rewarding. It can engross you and take you away from things as well.
Oh yeah, because I mean I got very ill and I have a anxiety disorder, for want of a better phrase, and gardening's really helped me because it grounds me, and I have to kind of feel. You know, I like to feel the earth, and it's sensory. So it's definitely become a very beneficial thing for my well-being, and something that I actually deliberately put into my daily, weekly, monthly routine.
Right.
And I always liked gardening, but then I really started getting into it when I was in treatment, actually, because I had to go into treatment for anxiety.
Did they prescribe gardening?
Well, they sort of did, but then I sort of picked it up and created gardening at the place. Started growing dahlias and irises from, you know, bulbs, and sweet peas and some vegetables, and gardening very much gives to you. You know, like the process of creating something is sort of miraculous in a way. From a tiny seed or a tiny cutting, you can get these amazing plants. But you have to be patient, and you have to nurture, and maybe the act of nurturing something else kind of maybe aids you to nurture yourself. And it's amazing how people talk about, you know, pills and, you know, counselling, things like that, which all do work. But actually, you know, gardening and nature is like a brilliant healer, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it's just the best.
So what would you say to someone who, you know, who was in a similar position to you, who might have anxiety issues and is thinking about doing some gardening?
Don't be afraid, that's what I would say. Just start with one plant even, you know? Pick a plant and don't be deterred, because it's all trial and error anyway.
That's the, I mean, you know, things go wrong, we all have failures, but that's all part of life anyway.
Part of it.
And just keep going.
Yeah. And actually I was speaking to a friend the other day, and she said, she's a great gardener, and she said, oh, when in doubt, garden. And I just thought that was lovely.
Do you get to a stage where you're aware of something happening, you think, right, I've got to go and get in the garden, I've got to spend some time out there?
Yeah, definitely, and it has really helped kind of calm me down, and then I get to come here and feel the space of the garden, and it really relaxes me.
Do you find this place inspirational for your work?
I do, yeah. I mean, there's a shepherd's hut, you know, up behind us, and I come down and I write my songs down here. I write the lyrics. I wrote my latest record down here, and it is lovely to have just a vista to look out on, and just it gives more space in my head, you know, to be able to clear it all, and then I can just let the words flow.
Is there one aspect of gardening that you really like doing?
My favourite thing to do is to grow from seed or grow from bulb. I've just seen that one of my dahlias has come up again. I was more excited about that than I probably was about my first #1. I mean, it's, you know, some people would think it's tragic, but for me, I actually spoke to the dahlia. I said, welcome back.
I wouldn't mind a #1 though.
Would you? Well,
yeah.
I mean, the Tweeny's got one, so... I was going to say we could swap jobs, but I thought I can't say that while I've got a record coming out.
No, you haven't heard me sing, have you? Will, it's been great. Thank you so much for letting me into your garden and showing me around and spending time with you. It's been great.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure.
I remember when we showed that film for the first time last year, we had a huge response. People were both moved by Will's testament and also really helped and inspired by it, because so many people share those same problems of anxiety and depression, and lots of people get help from their gardens. Now, the damp garden, with its pond in the middle, is actually looking quite good despite the weather. It's been a really wet last 24 hours. The colours are really singing out. The pink of the quince blossom, the camassias, and also the water has cleared. And behind me is the glory of this bit of the garden at the moment, which is the Viburnum plicatum morisii, famed for the way that it grows in tiers, and the blossom shines out on all these different levels and lasts for really quite a long time. And then in the autumn, it has a second display of the most incredible, rich, burgundy, almost chocolate leaves. The thing that I'm happy with this year is I've underplanted it with Solomon's seal about 2 or 3 years ago. And this year, they've really taken off, and that combination is working well. Okay, that's enough looking. Let's do some work. Here are some jobs for your weekend. If your dahlias are growing strongly, but you're not ready yet to plant them out, tip them back by reducing the leading shoots to a pair of leaves. This will slightly delay flowering, but encourage side shoots that will give you more flowers for longer into autumn. It's time to earth up potatoes as the foliage appears above the soil. But if they're in raised beds like mine, you need to cover them with a mulch. I'm using straw, but if you can't get any straw, grass clippings will do the job, as will a layer of compost. This will protect the leaves from frost and also provide a blanket to stop light affecting the growing tubers. It's time to start planning biennials, such as wallflowers and foxgloves, for next year's display. Sprinkle the seed thinly onto a tray of compost. Cover these lightly with vermiculite, water, and then let them germinate. They will then develop into young plants which will overwinter before flowering next spring and summer. Well, it's typical. Most of today has been really wet and quite cold, and certainly this little thing, Patty and Nellie, have been hiding away, not wanting to come out into the bad weather. Nigel, mind you, has stuck with it. And now we're coming to a close. The sun has come out and it's lovely. But I hope that your VE Day bank holiday has been filled with sunshine and you've had a chance to get outside and enjoy it, and enjoy your gardens as much as you can for the rest of this bank holiday weekend. And I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next week. So until then, bye-bye.